Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on both Twitter and Clubhouse, Real Scott McKay on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube by searching my name, SCOTMCKAY. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com as always. And listen, gentlemen, if you haven't joined the Facebook group yet, you're missing out on a whole lot of fun and a very worthwhile venture, especially relative to some of the other flotsam and jetsam that is pretty much all over social media nowadays. You will find a great group of guys who want to be better men. It is worthwhile to go to the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. With me today is a 20-year Air Force veteran. He's also currently an airline pilot. He's flying 787s. How cool is that? And he loves anything military, aviation related, talks a little politics sometime, but this time around, we're not going to do much of any of that, probably to the relief of many of you guys, because another one of Greg's passions is talking about moving from one career path to another, balancing two careers and purposes, and also somehow balancing family life along with that. Man, if that doesn't strike a chord with most of you guys out there, if not all of you guys out there, I don't know what else would. All of this is about being a better man, being more attractive to a good quality woman because you are a man of purpose who is capable of leaving a legacy. Women love that. They eat it up. They lap it up like kittens lap up milk from a saucer, gentlemen. So without anything further, the host of the Greg Krino Show on Apple Podcasts, none other than Greg Krino from Santa Monica, California. Welcome, sir.
Scott, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'll tell you, man, it's a beautiful day here. I'm sure it's always a beautiful day in Santa Monica, California, right?
It is. It is. It's about 78 degrees here, and we don't have the 95% humidity that you get out there in San Antonio, although I love San Antonio.
95% would be really high. That's kind of Houstonish. That's Houstonian levels of humidity. Actually, the weather here is a jealously guarded secret. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and shut up, lest everybody leave California and move here, because we don't want you. Stay where you are. We got enough people.
I know. I have my moments too, so I have my eye on Texas.
Well, you would be welcome. You've been here before. You were telling me before we hit record on this particular session that you spent some time here in San Antonio at Lackland, which a lot of guys entering the Air Force most certainly do. So we'll treat you like a hometown boy, man. No worries there.
Yeah. Actually, it was Laughlin, the one out by Del Rio by the sea.
Oh,
so
Laughlin Air Force Base is a lot different than Lackland Air Force Base.
Yeah, although I've been at Lackland, but yeah, I spent about a year at Laughlin, and that was during my pilot training days. So
okay, gotcha.
I have a soft spot in my heart for that central southern Texas area.
Oh, yeah, me too, obviously. They have the C-5 Galaxies at Lackland, which are really something to see. They're strangely, oddly quiet, even when they fly right over your head for as huge as
Yeah, I know. It's like you wait for it to fall out of the sky. Like probably the best flyby I ever saw was a C-5. It had the gear down, the tailgate open, and it went about 100 knots over my college. And they had the guys with their feet hanging out the back. So sometimes, speed is not the best. If you got a huge airplane, then show it off and go nice and slow.
Yeah, those things can actually handle a pretty short runway. I'll tell you what is an impressive airplane is that C-17.
Oh, yeah.
They're amazing. Yeah. They're like the 747 SP version of a C-5, only high performance and, hot and high airports and all that stuff. Well, we swore to these guys we wouldn't talk about airplanes.
I know. It's easy to deviate with me. Sorry about that, Scott. I'm ready for whatever you have.
Oh, but they're so cool, though, man. My kids love the air shows almost as much as I do when they happen. Hopefully they'll start up again with COVID.
Yeah.
Things are opening up.
Oh, yeah. We'll get there.
Looking forward to it. All right. So, Greg, man, obviously you are literally walking the talk here. You're an Air Force guy and an airline pilot, plus you're running podcasts, doing some self-help stuff. Tell us a little bit about the careers and purposes you are currently balancing so we can kind of get a read on that.
So currently I have a lot of balls in the air. So I have an Air Force job. So I'm a part-time reservist where I'm working on, I'm doing Air Operations Center work. So for people who don't know what that is, it's basically the group of people who help plan wars. So in various parts of the world, we have an Air Operations Center that is in charge of that conflict area. So right now I'm focused on the Korean Peninsula. So that's kind of what my squadron does. So I've got that as a part-time job. And then, of course, the airline job is sort of my real job, if you want to put that in quotes. So I'm an airline pilot for United. And the caveat is I don't want to speak for United. I have to just throw that out there. I'm speaking for myself when I talk about airline issues. So that's my full-time job. And then I was a lawyer as well. So in 2010, I graduated law school and passed the bar in Arizona. I never practiced full-time, but I do some part-time work. So I am doing a case right now. And then I do the podcast stuff as well. So I've got, again, a lot of balls in the air. I don't have any kids currently, although my wife and I are working on one. So we'll see what happens with that. But we would like to have a family one day.
Oh, the balls that will be spinning in the air once you start having kids.
Yes. And I'll have to come back, hopefully, God willing, if we are successful, I can come back on and I can tell you how it's going with that sixth ball in the air, which will be the biggest ball of my life.
Yes, it will. I have to ask, okay. You are both a lawyer and an airline pilot. Yes. Is it legal or illegal to get on the PA system in flight and utter the phrase, "Let's go, Brandon," to your passengers?
It is not illegal.
Would you ever do such a thing?
I don't have the cojones to do that. I don't know. United is we're a pretty woke airline. I personally am not, but I would be afraid to do that. But my heart is with you. Let's put it that way.
Oh, I didn't say one way or the other. I'm not showing favoritism in any direction. I just figure I have the lawyer who's also an airline pilot on my show. So the question was burning a hole in my soul. That's all.
Yeah, the short answer is it's not illegal per the government, but you would have to know what your employment contract is. And that's where it gets sticky. That's where it gets very sticky.
Frankly, I think you're better off letting that sleeping dog lie.
Yeah, maybe after the engines are shut down, then you might have a case for the "Let's go, Brandon."
Right on.
While the engines are running, oh man, I don't know.
So I think a lot of guys think, all right, I have to get out of the Air Force before I become an airline pilot. But you managed to do both simultaneously.
Yes.
Now, I'm also assuming you have a pretty hefty security clearance.
I do. Yes. I've got the top secret, and that's about as far as I can go with that one. On the podcast.
Are there things you can't tell your wife or you'd have to kill her? Or is that a myth?
Yeah, oh man, where do I go with that one? There's so many places.
It's a yes or no answer, Mr. Krino.
There's nothing that I know that if my wife knew that I'd have to kill her. I'm not that special. What people don't realize is that the top secret clearance is a very broad clearance. So just because you have it, it just means that you may know things that are you may be allowed to know things that are top secret, but you may not actually know them. So they have to read you into all these additional programs. And the one that I got right into was really pretty boring. I mean, I felt like killing myself when I was being briefed on it because it was so boring. But no, nothing that I would have to kill anybody else for. But it'd be a good excuse. It's a good threat to have. It's a good leverage to have with her in arguments.
Yes, especially if you can do it 100 ways with a ballpoint pen, like a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
You're a much better guy than that. You're a bigger man than that, I'm sure.
I try to be publicly.
So have you been to Area 51? Have you flown Janet?
I've not been there, but I've looked inside. I've flown around it. So Area 51 is the airspace is a 25 nautical mile square, about 100 miles north of Vegas. And it's surrounded by a few hundred square miles of airspace around it that only Air Force people can go in, or only military aviation can go into. So I've done a number of exercises up there as a pilot, and we fly around what's called the donut hole. And if you go into the donut hole, you get in big trouble, even as an Air Force pilot, and they'll send you home. So, but I can look inside. Yeah.
Man, that's so fascinating. And anybody who's ever stayed on the Vegas Strip and has any interest in aviation at all couldn't help but notice the plain white wrapper 737s with the red stripe down the side.
I know. They're trying to make them not obvious, but they're just so obvious for that reason. It's like, why not just dress it up in like jet blue? Make it look like something else.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. It's like the worst. It's the worst kept secret, I think.
Yes, it's called the most mysterious airline in the world, and they fly their workers and contractors back and forth from McCarran to Area 51 and a couple other secretive locations all day long. Interesting stuff. I was just curious. All right, man. So you've got this going on. You don't have any kids in your life yet. But I have to ask you before we get started, you're planning a family with your lovely wife. And lately in the news have been a couple pretty high profile guys who basically disappeared off the map. Well, one is the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and one is the secretary of the transportation department, Pete Buttigieg. And these guys went on leave because they wanted to spend more time with their family and their kids, giving up pretty important meetings and perhaps not doing very important jobs to spend that time, that quality time, if you will, as Gavin Newsom put it, with their families. Now, right or wrong, the question is begged to be asked, if these guys can do it, or even if you want to style it as getting away with it, if these guys can get away with taking time off from a job that is literally in the global eye, then what's my excuse? Why am I such a workaholic? Is that kind of on your train of thought?
It is. And I think the principle is honor your commitments. So if you are going to undertake a career, whether it's political office or a lawyer or an airline pilot, you have to make sure that you can see that through. And we talk about work-life balance. And I think that's important, but you can't, that doesn't mean only doing your life, it's a balance. So you have to realize that one will impact the other. And just because people say, well, we need to spend more time with our families, that's not an excuse for you to not do your job. So I'm one of these people that will say, look, I've done a couple of major career changes, but I never did that with the illusion that I could just bail at any moment and, go and hang out with my family and think that that was okay. Like people still depend on you. And I think that people need to take that into account when they make these commitments. So if you don't want to if you're not willing to dedicate whatever it is, 60 hours a week, you should know this going in. You should have done your research going into these career fields. If you can't make that commitment, then don't run for office. Don't ask to be the transportation secretary. Don't be an airline pilot. You're kind of embracing another family when you embrace another career. So the key is do your research ahead of time. Make sure the people that you are currently committed to are okay with that, which is what I did. And then you'll be okay.
Yeah. I think it's easy for someone to look at a person who's lazy and or shirking their responsibility and say, well, that person lacks character. That person isn't man enough to do the job he said he would do and keep the commitments he said he would. But what you're talking about kind of brings to mind that pendulum swinging the other way. If I have a hard time saying no and I thereby take on too many commitments, that's also a character issue, isn't it? If you can't fulfill on all those, if your plate's too full, as it were, right?
That's true. That is true. And that's something that I personally have had to address with myself is taking on too many commitments. And the way I have been able to, I guess, deal with that is, well, a lot of it's been through trial and error. I know with myself, I can do 2 things well. I can do 3 things okay. I can't do 4. And so I know that if I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to take on a 4th commitment, I need to drop something out. And I learned this back when I think the first time it ever became an issue was when I was a kid. I was in high school. I was playing 2 sports at the time, and I wanted to take on a 3rd. I told my mom, I want to play football. And she looked at me, she goes, Greg, you have to stop something. You're starting to take on things that are now damaging the previous things that you've taken on. And so you just have to know yourself, know what your skill levels are, and know at what point are you going to hit that diminishing return. And for me, it's about 3. Like I said, 3 major things. That includes career, that includes 1 or 2 major hobbies. That's about my limit. The 4th, and things are going to decline. And the second thing is, I said this previously, is get the people that you're currently committed to buy into that additional commitment. For example, I have my airline job and I have my Air Force Reserve job. If I want to take on a 3rd thing, a 3rd major career, I would have to talk to those previous 2, my airline employer and my Air Force employer, to see if it's okay, to see if can I handle a reduction in commitment. If they're okay with it, by all means, take on that third commitment. But if they say, no, that's going to be a problem, then you're going to have to quit something. So it's about honesty up front. It's about knowing what your current skills are.
It seems to me that oftentimes we think of the default masculine frame as, I got this. I don't need anybody else's help. I'm self-sufficient and I'll get the job done. Just give me time. But the more mature, evolved, virtuous masculine will say to himself, all right, what's the right way to do this? What is my purpose? What are those things that I can uniquely contribute to the world, that I'm passionate about contributing to the world, that I'm motivated to contribute to the world, and I know I'm disciplined enough and talented enough to bring it to fruition. Nothing less, nothing more. What can I effectively influence before taking too much on where everything is negatively affected by, either greed or immaturity in trying to take on too many things? And it sounds like you've struck a really good balance at that. And what I want you to tell these guys now, if you would, are some practical pointers on how we can do the same thing. I mean, what are some red flags that we got too much going on or that we don't have enough going on? And how do we really discern what those next steps are?
I would say, let me talk about the issue of too much going on, because I've never had the problem of not enough going on personally. But how I know that I have too much going on is it starts affecting my sleep, and it starts affecting my ability to take care of my own body. So if I know that I need 8 hours in bed every night, as soon as I start going down to 7, I can only do that for about, maybe a week. And then if I go less than that, then I can't work out. I can't take care of my own body. I know that I need 8 hours of sleep. I know that for me to be physically happy with myself, the way I look, the way I feel, I need to work out at least 4 days a week. And so if I take on an additional commitment and those things start suffering, then I know it's too much. The second thing is, and this is where you should not let it get this far, is when your close family members start telling you. When they start getting angry at you, when you start getting into conflicts because you're dropping commitments with them, that's another indicator that you've taken on too much. And again, I speak from experience. I know that, like I said before, my limit is 3 major endeavors in life, and that's it. But yeah, the first indication is going to be, are you dropping below your normal sleep and workout and health habits?
In keeping with the airline motif, you got to put your own mask on before you can help others.
Yep, absolutely.
There you go.
That's really it. And it's everybody has their limit. Everybody has a line where they are going to eventually collapse. And I liked your airline analogy, but another one that I learned as a kid was the lifeguard analogy. So when you're going to rescue somebody, they will tell you as a lifeguard, you need to take care of yourself first. So if you think you're going to hurt yourself by climbing up onto these rocks and out into those crashing waves, don't do it. You can't just jump into something and then now you've got 2 people that need to be rescued. The person that you were going to rescue and then yourself.
Yeah, they teach you that in advanced life saving, that if you do this wrong, a person who is drowning and therefore panicking will very happily take you down with them.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're going to approach a victim to effect a rescue and that victim swims over toward you and starts clawing at you and tries to push you under, they tell you, punch them in the face, smack them and push them away from you and tell them, calm down. And then you can tread water around them. And then when they calm down, then you can do the approach again.
Mama said, knock you out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do recommend that. I mean, it's a little harsh if you're a high schooler wanting to get kind of a cool job at the swimming pool over the summer so chicks will dig you. I have a feeling sometimes they leave it out of that. But I think if you're talking about advanced life-saving training at the adult level, they will absolutely recommend, if this person is fighting you and you're in the water with them, you have to kind of treat them like a great white shark and punch them in the nose. But anyway, a good analogy there, and definitely every bit as good of an analogy as the one about the oxygen masks. So I would like to opine briefly for the benefit of the guys out there who feel like, well, I don't have enough going on. I haven't found my purpose. I'm working in a dead-end job. I got too much time on my hands. I don't have a social circle. Smoking cigarettes and watching Captain Kangaroo, as the song goes. I think if you feel too isolated, even in this postmodern world we live in where the pandemic is going on and people have kind of let their social muscles atrophy, If you're spending too much time playing around on Netflix, spending too much time video gaming, unless, it's what you do for a living, right? Video gaming aspect of your life has something to do with productivity for you, meaning you're in the business or something. Spending too much time watching porn or flat out feeling bored. That's when you need some direction in your life. That's when you need to think about what could I better be filling my time with. And you know what, Greg, even though it isn't your experience particularly, I think there are a lot of guys who can relate to that. And man, that boredom is a warning sign. Mm-hmm. That frittering away the moments that make up a dull day, as Pink Floyd once said, is just toxic. It wears away at your soul. It wears away at your masculinity. You already noted that it can wear away at your health. And indeed, again, here's that pendulum swinging the other way. Just like being too busy and too stressed can wear away at our health. Being too soft, being too bored. Next thing you know, we're getting the weight. The lbs are coming on. We're not exercising. We're just flat out just not feeling like it, whatever it is. And that's when we need to sound the alarm in our own life and say to ourselves, hey, you know what? I got to start filling my life with something meaningful, or it's going to eat away at me as a man, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you are a person who lacks purpose and you don't know what to do, you're finding yourself bored a lot, you don't have a reason to get out of bed, then the person who you should start with is yourself. You're not going to be able to help anybody, like we talked about just a few minutes ago, unless you're helping yourself first. And it's not selfish. It just means that that's what the situation is. And so what I say to folks is sit down and write down the things that you really dislike about yourself. You don't have to show anybody. Whatever it is, could be the fact that you are awkward in social situations. Maybe you are not good at a certain subject in school. Maybe you lack a certain physical, you're not a good runner. It could be anything. Just write down all the things you hate about yourself and then take the worst one and start fixing it. So say you're a type of guy, and I think this happens to a lot of guys. They get intimidated easily. They don't know how to handle themselves like in a fight. Go and take jujitsu, go and take a self-defense course. So just find what you hate about yourself and start the process of fixing it. And when you do that, you'll start meeting other people. You might find yourself entering a community of folks, and maybe just by being there with them, now you found a purpose. But start with yourself. And, worst case, if you do not find a career out of this thing, worst case, you found something and you started to change it. You're better than you were before.
Now, I would say it's important to add there, make sure you have your identity solid enough that you know who the hell you are and what you're about, what you believe in. Have that foundation firmly established, because otherwise you may fall into the trap of starting to dislike things about yourself because someone else told you you should dislike that about yourself, or doing something because others are pressuring you to do it, or because someone told you that's what you should be doing or it's a good idea. And when it's not your own, it's not going to have the same impact either on your life, your satisfaction, your confidence, your well-being, even your legacy, and certainly it won't impact others as much as if it's your own.
Well, that is true. I think when you're making that list, you do not want to write down the things that other people say about you. You have to have an honest conversation with yourself. And if you think that you are dumb, for example, then fine. Write the thing that you are dumb in and go through the process of fixing it.
Well, hold on a second. Ron White once famously and perhaps correctly said, you can't fix stupid.
I disagree.
So what do I do with that? Well, talk to me about that.
Well, you can when it's you. You can when it's yourself. It's hard to fix somebody else who is stupid and unwilling to change. On that subject, Ron White was correct. But when it's yourself, hell yeah, you can fix it. You can do anything you want. And like I said, the worst case is that you're better than you were before. So if you went through this process, you wrote down the list of things that you don't like about yourself, you started ticking them off one at a time and improving them, what possibly could happen that's bad? At the end of that, you're going to be better than you were before. And then maybe there will be somebody along the way that saw you doing this, and they might go, wow, maybe I should start fixing myself too. And next thing you know, stupid is starting to fix itself. You can't fix somebody else. You can't fix somebody else who doesn't want to be fixed. That is absolutely correct. But you absolutely can fix yourself, and you should.
Now, whether IQ in and of itself is a social construct or not aside, I think what you're saying is fantastic advice, because sometimes when we do feel stupid or dumb, to use your word, it's because we're more ignorant than lacking intelligence, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're getting at. And ignorance is a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of sophistication in a certain area that I wish I was better at. And that is very much within our circle of influence, right?
Well, that's a good distinction. So however you want to label the terms, I imagine everybody's born with a certain size glass. Maybe that's your potential. Maybe that's your intellect. Maybe that's what you could be. But how much water is in the glass is how much knowledge and skill you currently have. And yes, there are certain people who are born with a very large glass. For me, I always kind of sucked at basketball. My glass in that sport is pretty small. But I could fill that glass. Maybe there's some other thing where my size glass is larger than somebody else, and I can fill that one with more water. So your potential is the size of the glass, and the amount of water is what you've done with that. So you could have a person who has, like I said, a very large glass, but then very little water because they lack the focus and the discipline and the ambition to fill it. And you could have people who have maybe a moderate or even a small glass, but they have the grit and they have the drive to fill that thing all the way up to the top. It's what you've done that matters. Nobody cares what your potential is. Potential is just, it's a dream until you actually fulfill it.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. Having grit and determination and wherewithal and passion and drive. You have to have talent or else you're only going to get so far. And I think that's the word that best describes this glass of water you were talking about. I know people who love to play guitar. I know people who collect guitars, but they're just never going to be Eddie Van Halen. They don't have the innate natural ability to do that. In the sport that my kids are involved with, I'm easily the most passionate person in the family about that sport. The kids love it. My wife loves it, but I'm also the worst one in the family at actually doing it. Right. My kids are BMX racers, by the way, Greg, but these guys.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So what I am good at is rocking the microphone. At least I hope I'm still good at it. It's making me a living here. So what I do is I do that at the BMX races. I'm the play-by-play announcer / stand-up comedian for these kids and their parents. And that I'm one of the best at, you see. So I have a passion for this particular sport. And even though I never was going to be and certainly will never be now at my age a pro BMX racer and going to the Olympics or anything anytime soon, I am very good at taking what I'm talented at and what I'm also passionate about and finding a way to contribute to that sport, which I'm similarly passionate about in that perhaps unique and creative way. So how about that? We can always be creative in the way we want to contribute to that which we're passionate about. Like, for example, if I'm a crappy pilot, and I pass out at a G.5 and stuff like that, but I love aviation, then there are perhaps talents in my life that would be wonderfully served in the aviation industry. We just have to be, as creative as we are, gritty and talented and driven and focused, right?
Well, yes, and you can find something in that industry that you can contribute to, absolutely. But what I want people to be careful of is also comparing yourself to other people. When we look at an Eddie Van Halen, for example, an incredible virtuoso on the guitar, something that I could never be. But there are also things that I can do that Eddie Van Halen can't do. Now, maybe I'm not going to be the world's greatest 787 pilot, but it is something that I can do and I get paid pretty well for and I'm respected for. So I think we tend to look at like the best aspects of other people and then compare them to the worst aspects of ourselves. And that's just a recipe for disaster. Like the people who have done extraordinarily well in certain things, it can often come at a huge cost. And that cost might be their family. It might be other experiences too. Like there are people who are Olympic level swimmers, but they've never traveled. They've never flown an airplane. They've never, climbed a mountain. They've dedicated 100% of their time toward that thing. So we have to realize that great success can also often does require great sacrifice. Just a little bit of perspective will help.
Yeah, I think that's valid.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm reminded of that cat from Iron Maiden who's in the band and also flies the band's 757 around, or used to. I always thought that was cool.
Oh, I'd have to look this one up. That's a great cultural reference.
Yeah. His name escapes me right now because, frankly, I wasn't a big hair band guy even back in the day. But what I'll do is I'll look him up and I'll put it in the show notes for these guys. But it's pretty cool. Comparison is odious. And a lot of people have said to themselves, or maybe out loud to other people, I would really love to do this with my life. And I think I'm pretty good at it, but I'm never going to insert the name of the best guy in the world at it here. So I might as well not even try. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, there's people who have been more successful as dating and relationship coaches than I. But at one time there, I was in the top 20 in the world in terms of name recognition and people coming to me and getting the gigs on media and stuff. And I bet there were probably a million guys who wish they were me. But kind of like when LeBron talks about the Mount Rushmore of NBA history and how he's disrespected because he's not on it, that tends to be an eye roller because it's like, hey, LeBron, if you're not happy with being in the top 6 or 8 guys who have ever touched a basketball, then that's being kind of silly and perhaps immature and unevolved. Now, this conversation is also 10 years old, the one I'm referring to. And since then, I think most people would probably put him on that Mount Rushmore. But still, you get my point. And also, you start comparing yourself to other people based on their one talent going, man, I'm just not as worthwhile a human being as they are. And then you're completely forsaking this simple fact that you're good at all sorts of things that they can't touch. I mean, world-class guys at virtually anything are outsourcing all the stuff they're no good at, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I got guys who do my websites. I got guys who do my video intros. I have no idea how they do what they do. Heck, I have no idea, really, honestly, how you do what you do when I fly United Airlines. But I'm glad you're doing it because it gets me where I'm going. And yet, there are things I contribute to the world. There are things that other people contribute to the world that are just as valuable. It's just simply a matter of sober judgment and applying what it is we want to do. And, if there are a couple things in your life, one of them that pays the bills and another one that you do on weekends, like in my case, doing BMX announcing on weekends and doing the dating coaching podcasting thing as a day job, or in your case, flying for United and being a weekend warrior. Hey, that's what it's all about. And as long as that balance is there and the family is feeling loved and taken care of, it seems to me like, we're fulfilling our purpose as men. I love it. I love every bit of it. And I think this has been a great conversation. And gentlemen, I want to point you to Greg Krino's podcast and all the other sorts of cool things that he's doing there by sending you to mountaintoppodcast.com/Krino. Now, it's Krino. All right. Frankly, you can go to Greg Krino, Greg with 2 G's, not 3, right? Unlike, say, Popovich, another Air Force Academy guy, by the way, Greg Popovich, coach of the Spurs. When you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Krino, you will discover Greg Krino's incredibly interesting podcast. Now, listen, I know a lot of you guys are polymaths and very intelligent, hyper successful guys. This show is going to be right down your alley. Go ahead and head to mountaintoppodcast.com/Krino and get you some. Greg Krino, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. Really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, hope you'll come back.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, guys, go to mountaintoppodcast.com if you haven't lately. Download the free goodies there. There's a book called Sticking Points Solved. Hey, I'm going to issue you a challenge. Get that book, download it, Sticking Points Solved. And my challenge to you is, I bet if there is an issue you have in your life or have ever had in your life relative to dating and women, it will be covered in the book, Sticking Points Solved. Take me up on that challenge. Go to mountaintoppodcast.com and download it. Hey, listen, the guys over at Origin Maine are doing amazing things. If you haven't tried their protein powder, it is the absolute best tasting there is, and it works better than any I've ever tried. Great stuff. You make yourself a shake in the morning, you might be good till dinner. So if any of you guys are trying to lose a couple extra lbs, Jocko Willink and Origin Maine can help you do that. Go to mountaintoppodcast.com/origin. Use the code MOUNTAIN10 to get an extra 10% off your order. You can also use that same coupon code when you visit mountaintoppodcast.com/hero soap. Lucas Rui and the guys over at Hero Soap are giving a percentage of all sales to wounded warriors. This is a good cause. Plus, you'll smell like a man, feel like a man by partaking of the goodies over there at herosoap.com, which you can get by clicking the link on mountaintoppodcast.com or by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/hero soap. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.